Ugh. I slammed my hands onto the table frustratedly. My boyfriend, 𝗕𝗓𝗓, who was sitting on the sofa watching a movie, looked across at me.
Babe, what's wrong?
It's this stupid laptop charger. I held it up annoyed. It's not working.
Well, you can either sit there and get upset with the charger, or you can purchase a new one on Amazon.
I hate purchasing products online. I never get what I purchase.
Everywhere is closed, babe. What other choice do you have?
𝗕𝗓𝗓 did have a point. I needed my laptop to work, so I decided to purchase a charger via Amazon. Little did I know that making that purchase was going to change my life forever. Hi, my name is Cindy, and boy, do I have a story for you. But before I get to that, don't forget to like and subscribe to our amazing channel. Of course, smash that notification bell so you'll know when our new stories are posted. The next day, my Amazon package arrived. I took it to the table and opened it up. You've got to be kidding me, I groaned in despair. 𝗕𝗓𝗓's head peeked over my shoulder and he chuckled. This isn't funny, I protested. 𝗕𝗓𝗓 reached into the box and pulled out the man's gold watch that was snuggled comfortably in the box.
I'm sorry, babe, but you really do have the worst luck when ordering products online.
He slipped the gold watch onto his wrist and admired it.
Don't worry, I'll place another order today, okay?
I nodded. There was nothing else I could do but wait. After a few hours, the package arrived and inside was a brand new charger. I quickly forgot about the watch and set out to complete my work projects. Later that week was 𝗕𝗓𝗓's and I's 3rd anniversary. We exchanged gifts. 𝗕𝗓𝗓𝗓 got me a gorgeous charmed bracelet. When I handed 𝗕𝗓𝗓𝗓's gift, I looked at him.
It may not be as nice as the one in the Amazon package, but I hope you like it.
𝗕𝗓𝗓𝗓 looked at me suspiciously and opened his gift. He smiled broadly as he took it out of the gift box.
I could see why you were upset when you opened the Amazon package.
Yes, people, I purchased a watch for 𝗕𝗓𝗓𝗓 about 3 weeks ago. On the back was an inscription, "Time stands still when I'm with you." He leaned over and kissed me.
Thanks, babe. It's what I always wanted.
He removed the gold watch from his wrist and replaced it with the one I bought.
I still have another surprise for you.
He took my hand and kissed it gently. My eyes lit up.
I asked Devin if we could use his cafe tonight for our anniversary dinner. We always go to dinner, and I didn't want to break tradition.
A few hours later, when we arrived at the cafe, the counters were lined with flowers and candles. In the middle of the cafe was a table set for 2. And guess what, guys? He proposed! And of course I said yes. We had an amazing dinner. By the time we left the restaurant, I was on cloud 9. Nothing could have happened that night to change my mood. Or so I thought. As we walked towards the car park, I was admiring my ring when the unthinkable happened. A black car pulled up next to us. I felt something hit me over the head. I staggered and through dazed eyes, I looked on in horror as 𝗕𝗓𝗓𝗓 was forced into the car. No! I cried as I reached out for him. The car sped off and I tried to run after it, but I looked like a newborn cat, tripping over my own 2 feet. After a few seconds, I sank to the ground and cried. Eventually, I was able to pull out my phone from my purse and call the police. I sat on one of the benches outside the cafe and waited for the police. When they arrived, they took my statement. Before leaving, they advised me to go to the hospital and get my head checked out. I nodded and they left. I didn't want to go to the hospital. I wanted to find my fiancé. Luckily for me, the keys to the car were in my purse. I hopped into the car and tried to figure out why anyone would want to kidnap 𝗕𝗓𝗓𝗓. As soon as I got home, I sat by my phone and hoped that the kidnappers would call. At least I would know if 𝗕𝗓𝗓𝗓 was okay. I must have fallen asleep because my eyes shot open when I heard my phone ring. It was a private number. This has to be them, I thought to myself. Hello?
Hello, Cindy.
The way he said my name made the hairs on the back of my neck stand firm. The male voice on the other end continued.
The watch that you received a few days ago, it is very valuable to me. Tomorrow, bring it to the old docks on Pier 1 for 10 p.m. Don't contact the police.
The line went dead. I went to the dresser where 𝗕𝗓𝗓𝗓 kept his watch and picked it up. What's so valuable about this watch? I scrutinized front and back. Suddenly, the cap behind the watch popped off and a computer chip fell out. Well, I'll be damned, I muttered to myself as I picked up the chip. Okay, Cindy, you can't call the police or 𝗕𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓 is done for. You'll need to find out what's on the chip. I called my ex-boyfriend Ryan, who was obsessed with anything techie. I told him what happened and asked if he could bring the chip tonight for him to check out.
Sure thing, Cindy. Anything I can do to help.
Immediately, I placed the chip in my purse and hopped into the car. Upon arrival at Ryan's, I handed him the chip. While he worked on removing the passwords from the chip, I paced aimlessly.
Cindy, if you don't stop pacing, you'll owe me a new carpet.
Ryan joked. Sulking, I sank myself into the sofa and closed my eyes. The black car, me reaching out to 𝗕𝗓𝗓, the pain, the confusion, all seemed to rush back at once. I felt someone touch me lightly and I jumped.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to startle you.
Ryan's face was filled with concern.
Do you need water? A soda?
I gulped hard and looked at Ryan's clock on the wall. It was 2 a.m. No, I'm okay. I rubbed behind my neck. What did you find?
Come and check this out.
Ryan walked back to the computer and I followed.
It took me a while to crack it, but I did. Cindy, you've come across something that could put a lot of people away for a long time.
Do you recognize any of these names? I squinted as I looked through the names on the computers. Hey, is that Tom Morgan, as in the Judge Tom Morgan? The one who released Sylvester Riley even though there was evidence to put him away for 20 years?
Yep, you're correct. This chip holds account numbers, money transfers, and names of lawyers, judges, police officers, senators. If they're dirty, their name is on this payroll.
I felt the room spinning. The last thing I remember was someone holding me before I fell to the ground and everything went black. I woke up groggy the next morning trying to figure out where I was. Then everything that happened before came rushing back. Ryan walked into the room with a tray. On it were bacon, eggs, pancakes, juice, and a bottle of painkillers.
You gave me quite a scare. You have a nasty bump on the back of your head that you need to check out.
I'll be okay, I said as I opened the bottle of painkillers. I popped 2 in my mouth and gulped down some of the juice.
I've made 2 copies of the chip. I'll keep one and I'll give you the next one.
Ryan handed me the chip and a flash drive.
Hide the chip back in the watch. Do you want me to come with you today by the pier?
I can't risk it. I'll go alone. Thank you for everything. I left Ryan's and replaced the chip as soon as I got home. Around 9:30 p.m., I grabbed the watch and jumped into my car. Once I got to the pier, I didn't even have time to turn off my engine before someone yanked open the driver's door and dragged me out the car. He was a muscular guy covered with tattoos.
Do you have the watch?
I nodded. It's in the car in my purse. He nodded to one of the guys with him who dumped the contents of my purse on the passenger seat. When the watch fell out, he grabbed it and slammed the car door.
Got it, boss.
I was dragged to one of the old warehouses where I saw 𝗕𝗓𝗓𝗓 tied to the chair. His face was badly bruised. I pulled away from my captor and ran towards him, tears streaming down my face. Oh, babe, what did they do to you? I murmured softly as I touched his face lightly. I turned to the tattooed man and yelled, You have your watch now, let us go! We promised we won't tell anyone, just let us go!
Frankie, check the chip to make sure it's A-OK.
A tall, lanky man with glasses walked up and took the chip. He walked to the corner of the room where a computer system was set up and inserted the chip. After a few minutes, he walked up to the tattooed man and whispered something to him.
It looks like we have a problem. Seems that our chip has been tampered with.
The tattooed man whisked out a gun and pointed it directly at 𝗕𝗓𝗓𝗓 and I. My eyes widened and my pulse raced. There was no way we were going to get out of this alive. Suddenly, the lights went out and smoke filled the room.
Come on, guys!
Ryan's voice came from behind me.
We don't have much time.
After untying 𝗕𝗓𝗓𝗓, Ryan and I supported him as we exited the back of the warehouse. Ryan quickly opened the back door of his blue van and we placed 𝗕𝗓𝗓𝗓 inside, before scrambling to the front seats. As we were about to pull off, we heard the back door open and 𝗕𝗓𝗓𝗓 screamed. Ryan and I looked back in horror as the back door of the van was open. The tattooed man had 𝗕𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓 by the neck, dangling a few inches from the ground. 𝗕𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓 kicked in the back of the van door and, with his last bit of strength, shouted, Go! Ryan sped off and I looked in the rearview mirror. 𝗕𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓 was tossed to the ground like a rag doll. The tattooed man stood over him with a gun. The last sound I heard before we drove out of the parking lot was one single explosion. Ryan pulled up to the police station a few minutes later. By then, I was crying uncontrollably. With his help, I was able to go into the station and make a report about everything that happened. I also gave them a copy of the file that I kept in my shoe for safekeeping. After giving the statements, the officer took my number and they said they would call me if they found anything. Ryan took me home and walked me to the door.
I don't think you should stay here tonight. Or at least not alone.
Ryan touched my face affectionately. I'll be okay. I just need some time alone. Ryan nodded and headed back to the van, and I closed the door. After I showered, I sat down and flicked through the TV stations. I couldn't wrap my mind around the fact that 𝗕𝗓𝗓𝗓𝗓 was gone. I got up to get some water, and when I passed the window, I noticed Ryan's van parked outside. It was around 6 a.m. when the officer called my phone to say the only thing they found at the warehouse was a pool of blood, but no body. I thanked him for the information and hung up. That means 𝗕𝗓𝗍 could still be alive. This thought gave me the hope that I was looking for. I decided to talk to a reporter about what I found out. I figured that if they published it, and I used myself as bait, that once kidnapped, I would be taken to 𝗕𝗓𝗍. I set my plan in motion later that day. Then came the waiting part. Nothing happened for the first 2 days. Then, one night, when I opened my bedroom door, I saw a masked man standing by my bedroom window. Even though I was scared, the thought of seeing 𝗕𝗓𝗍 again gave me the courage that I needed. I allowed the man to put a black sack over my head and tie my hands. While walking through the house, heading towards the door, someone pushed me to the side and I heard grunting and things breaking around me. After a few minutes, the noise died down and someone snatched the sack from my head. Ryan, what are you doing? He quickly cut my ropes loose and grabbed me by the arm.
No time to explain now. Let's go.
Without another word, we got into the van and drove off. Why did you do that? He was going to take me to 𝗕𝗓𝗍. You spoiled everything.
Cindy, he was going to kill you.
He looked at me hesitantly.
There's something I need to show you.
A bit confused, I indulged Ryan. After a few hours, we arrived in a nice suburban area with white picket fences and 2-car garage houses. We sat in the van silently, each in our own thoughts. At approximately 6:30 a.m., a man emerged from a house. He was kissed by a heavily pregnant woman who had a little boy hanging onto her leg. When he looked in our direction before jumping into his car and driving off, my heart broke into a million pieces. 𝗕𝗓𝗍𝗍? So all this time he's been living 2 lives? Ryan squeezed my hand comfortingly.
There is something else that I need to tell you.
Ryan went on to tell me that he was an undercover agent, and now that everything has been exposed by me, there is a bounty on my head and I have to go into the witness protection program. He said that 𝗕𝗓𝗍𝗍 was working with the kidnappers to fake his death so he could come back to his family. I couldn't believe that I had risked my life and my freedom for someone who didn't love me. I felt broken and I felt betrayed. That day, I decided that before I closed my eyes for good on this earth, 𝗕𝗓𝗍𝗍 was going to pay. Do you want to see part 2 of my story where I get my revenge on 𝗕𝗓𝗍𝗍?
Stay away from me and stop making up stories about me. Please stop following me around like a lost puppy.
I couldn't believe that Mason could say such mean things to me. What happened to my best friend? I walked away with my head low, ignoring the laughter and whispers from everyone in my class. Hi, my name is Amy. 10 years ago, my best friend Mason moved away with his family. Now he's back, but he's not the Mason that I used to know. Wanna know why? Watch till the end. But first, please like this video and subscribe to this channel. Also, hit that notification bell so you don't miss more cool stories.
OMG, he's like so hot.
My friend Chloe was practically vibrating in her seat.
Oh please, he'll be mine by the end of 3rd period.
Sam, my other friend, rolled her eyes. What are you guys talking about? They both looked at me like I'd grown 2 heads.
Have you been living in a cave? Sometimes I wonder how you'd survive without us. There's a new guy in school. We saw him at the principal's office. Please let him be in our class.
Chloe put her hands together and looked up at the ceiling. Just then, the door opened and a tall boy with blonde hair walked in.
OMG, OMG, OMG.
Breathe, Chloe.
Class, I'd like you to welcome Mason Greenwood. He transferred from out of state.
Mr. Radish, our math teacher, announced. I knew that name. Mason? Oh my god, is that really you? Everyone stared at me.
Amy? Amy the piggy?
The whole class laughed. Yes, but I don't go by that anymore. As you can see, no more pigtails.
Of course. Wow, look at you. You look so different now.
I blushed a little. Chloe and Sam were watching us with their mouths open.
Mason, please sit. You and Amy will catch up later.
He took the only available seat in front of me. I didn't pay attention to Mr. Radish for the rest of the class.
Start talking, piggy.
Math class just ended. Chloe, Sam, and I stood outside waiting for Mason to finish talking to Mr. Radish. Don't call me that. Mason and I grew up together, but he moved 10 years ago.
Where did he move to? Heaven? Because they must have been missing an angel.
I'm no angel.
Mason laughed as he joined us. Oh god. I'm so sorry. My friends can be annoying. Sam rolled her eyes and pretended not to notice Mason standing right next to her. After a few awkward minutes of Chloe introducing herself to Mason, Mason and I excused ourselves and left.
So, Chloe.
I'm so embarrassed right now. She's not always like that, I promise.
I actually liked her energy.
Don't let her hear you say that. She'll declare you her boyfriend.
You say that like it's a bad thing.
We're both laughing now. Well, I guess it depends if you like wearing matching socks and drawing hearts on each other's notebooks. Mason visibly cringed. I thought so.
It's so good to see you again. How have you been? How's your mom?
Over the next few days, Mason and I spent a lot of time together. I invited him over to dinner and we had a great time remembering the good old days. Remember when we snuck out and you crashed your bike by Wickery Bridge? Mason looked confused for a minute but then smiled.
To be honest, I don't remember much from back then. It's part of the reason I decided to come back. I didn't want to completely forget this place. And you.
That's so sweet. We're glad to have you back.
Thanks, Mrs. Anderson.
After dinner, we went for a walk. Come on, you have to remember that night. You hurt your knee so bad you ended up in hospital. You had a huge scar here, see? I looked at his knee and was surprised to see that the scar was no longer there.
You're staring. More like drooling.
I'm not. The girls and I were watching as Mason and the rest of the basketball team practiced. He had joined the team about a week ago, much to my surprise. Mason never had any interest in sports, let alone basketball. Things had become a little bit tense between us after our walk that night. He looked uneasy around me. Whenever I brought up something from our childhood, he changed the subject or became very moody.
Amy, look! When did that even happen?
Mason was kissing Tracy, my sworn enemy. Tracy lived across the street from Mason and I. When we were kids, she made playing in our neighborhood a nightmare. She teased Mason about his braces and his glasses. Sometimes he'd go home crying. She's the one that came up with the name Amy the Piggy. Mason told everyone that the name was because I always had my hair in pigtails, but Tracy said it because I was fat. 10 years later, she was still just as mean, if not worse. How could he kiss her? I stood up and walked past them. Tracy looked at me and smiled. So did Mason. That evening, our doorbell rang and I ran to answer it. What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be across the street with Tracy? Ugh, I hate that I sounded jealous.
Come on, Amy. She's different now.
Wow.
Anyway, I just thought we could hang out a bit. What do you say?
What happened to your scar?
I'm getting tired of this. Can we hang out or not?
You didn't answer me.
Unbelievable. You know what? I tried. Goodbye, Amy.
He walked across the street to Tracy's house. Something was off with him. I could feel it. I just wasn't sure what. At school the next day, I saw Mason walk behind the library and jump over the fence. I followed him and did the same. I was no athlete, but I'd jumped over that fence a lot of times. At first, I thought he was going home, but a few hundred meters from home, he turned onto a deserted dirt road. The only property along the road was an abandoned factory. When he got to the factory gate, he stopped. An older guy was leaning against the gate, smoking. A car was parked nearby. I hid behind the wall and watched them.
What took you so long? I've been here an hour.
Basketball practice. Come on, let's go in.
I still don't get why you had to go and join that stupid team.
High school is boring. I need to occupy myself.
Whatever. Did Amy stop asking questions?
The mention of my name startled me and I took a step back. I stepped on a rock and fell.
What was that? Is somebody there?
My heart was beating so fast.
Come on, Joel, let's go.
I heard car doors open, then close a few seconds later. I peered around the corner and saw Mason and Joel disappear into some buildings. They were carrying 2 duffel bags. A few minutes later, they walked out without the bags. After they drove off, I thought about going in to check what was in those bags, but I didn't want to risk getting caught, so I left. Joel didn't look like the warm and fuzzy type.
Earth to Amy.
Chloe and I were in my room working on some assignments. She shut her book and stared at me.
Okay, talk.
I wasn't sure if I could trust Chloe with what I'd seen.
Amy, you're scaring me.
It's Mason. I saw him do something suspicious. Probably illegal.
What? When was this?
A few days ago, I followed him to the old factory by Raven Road. I told her everything. By the time I was done talking, Chloe was dialing Sam's number. What are you doing?
Hey, Sam, you need to get to Amy's right now.
Sam arrived half an hour later.
You want to tell me why you made me rush here like you guys were on fire? Sorry to disturb your beauty sleep, princess. We have a mission to get to.
Chloe filled in Sam on everything as we walked to the factory. When we got there, it was already dark and we had to use our phones as flashlights. The girls followed me to the building Mason and Joel had disappeared to a few days ago.
If I see a rat, I'm out of here.
We walked in and out of several empty rooms. Guys, look! In a corner, partially covered by rubble, were 2 duffel bags. Chloe ran and opened one of the bags. She dropped her phone and walked backwards.
Please don't say someone's dead in there.
I shone my flashlight towards the open bag. It's money. A lot of it. Probably millions. I opened the other bag and found even more money.
I don't like this. We need to get out of here now.
Should we call the police?
I don't want any trouble. Let's just leave.
We bolted out of there and didn't stop until we were outside the factory gate. When we got to my house, Mom told the girls that it was late and they needed to go home. That night, I had nightmares of Mason being a two-faced monster who took off his face at night. Yeah, no thank you. The next morning, I told Mom everything.
We need to call the police now. You should have told me last night.
Half an hour later, a police officer rang our doorbell and asked Mom and me to follow him. We arrived at the factory a few minutes later. I led them to the room with the money, only when we got there, it was empty. The money was gone.
Are you sure this is where it was?
Was there any money at all, miss? You know how kids are nowadays.
I knew that voice. I turned and blood drained from my face. It was Joel standing right behind my mom. He was in a police uniform. But I saw you. You and Mason put the money here a few days ago. You're a police officer?
This is Officer Callahan. He was transferred to our station a few weeks ago. What are you accusing him of?
He was here before. Him and my friend, neighbor, Mason. They took the money from a car and carried it here.
Amy, that's enough. Let's go now. We're sorry we wasted your time, officers. I'll make sure Amy never does this again.
But Mom, you have to believe me. I saw him.
Enough. I won't have you make false accusations about me. You're clearly a disturbed girl.
I ran out in tears. What on earth was going on? The next day at school, I knew I had to talk to Mason. I was sure of what I'd seen and I wanted to find out what was happening. Mason, can we talk?
Stay away from me and stop making up stories about me. Please stop following me around like a lost puppy.
I couldn't believe that Mason could say such mean things to me. What happened to my best friend? I walked away with my head low, ignoring the laughter and whispers from everyone in my class. I skipped school the next day. Chloe and Sam called, but I didn't pick up. Mom was so mad at me, I thought she'd ground me for life. Honestly, that would be fine with me because I was never going outside ever again anyway. An hour later, I was outside. There were loud noises coming from Mason's house. Before I could talk myself out of it, I ran all the way there. Mason, are you in there? The door opened and Mason ran out.
What now?
Is everything okay? I heard shouting.
For God's sake, Amy, leave me alone. Go back to your house before...
Who's in there with you? I pushed my way past him and walked into his house.
You shouldn't have done that.
Joel stood by the window looking down the street. He sounded so calm and cold. I knew immediately that I was in big trouble. I turned to walk back outside, but Mason stood in my way.
Why couldn't you just leave me alone? I don't know how Mason was ever friends with you. You're so annoying.
I knew it. Who are you? They both laughed.
She never stops, does she?
You have no idea.
I'm calling the police. When I took out my phone, fake Mason lunged at me. Get away from me! Somebody help! I screamed at the top of my lungs. He tried to cover my mouth, but I bit him and kept on screaming. Loud knocking came from the door.
Police, open up!
I slipped out of fake Mason's hold and went for the door. I opened it and ran into someone's arms. Let go of me!
Amy, calm down. It's me, Mason.
I looked up and stared into hazel eyes and glasses. Mason?
Yes, it's me. Are you hurt?
I hugged him as I cried. It's so good to see you. I thought I was going crazy. The door opened and police officers walked out. Joel and fake Mason were in handcuffs. One officer was carrying 2 duffel bags.
Ivan, what are you doing in my house? And you are? I'm Mason. This is my parents' house. That's Ivan, my friend and neighbor back home. And that's Joel, his stepbrother. They robbed a store and skipped town. Why is Joel in police uniform? He's not an officer. We know that now. Police in your town tracked them here. They arrived this morning and asked for our assistance arresting them.
Mason and I stood at the bus station saying goodbye. It had been a crazy couple of days. The police had recorded our statements and assured us that Ivan and Joel would not be released anytime soon. Mason told me that his parents had sent him to check on the house after they received an electricity bill from the power company. The house hadn't had a tenant in months. When he arrived, he saw police cars outside. I don't want you to leave.
I have graduation coming up and so do you, but I promise I'll come back, okay?
Okay, are you still planning to go to college here? Before he left years ago, we agreed to go to the same college a few miles out of town.
Yeah, I was planning to surprise you, but I think you've had enough surprises.
I sure have. Well then, I'll see you in a few months.
You bet.
I couldn't wait to have my best friend back, the real one this time.